In the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, where the horizon blurs the line between water and sky, lies a chilling mystery. This story is not a work of fiction, it is pieced together from fragments of truth, whispers of conspiracy, and a trail of unanswered questions. My name is Ryan Taylor, and this is the story of how an ordinary flight became one of the most haunting experiences of my life. It was September 2022, and I was traveling back to Los Angeles after a work trip to Sydney. My flight was on a red-eye, a midnight departure. The cabin was dimly lit, passengers settling into their seats with blankets and neck pillows. The soothing hum of the engines was the only sound as we ascended into the night sky. I had flown countless times before, but something about this flight felt off. Perhaps it was the strange announcement the captain made shortly after takeoff. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for an alternate route due to weather disturbances over the Pacific. Please remain seated and enjoy your flight." His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, a tension that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I brushed it off as fatigue and tried to get some sleep. About 2 hours into the flight, I woke to an eerie stillness. The usual hum of passenger chatter and the clinking of drink carts were absent. I looked around, most passengers were asleep, but a few were awake, staring at their seat screens with confused expressions. I turned on my screen, hoping to pass the time with a movie. But instead of the usual selection of entertainment, the screen displayed a map, a blank map with no route, no coordinates, and a single message, no signal. I waved over a flight attendant, a young woman named Olivia. She looked pale, her smile forced. "Excuse me," I said. "The map isn't working. Are we off course?" She hesitated before answering. "It's just a technical glitch. Nothing to worry about." But her tone betrayed her words. Something was wrong. As I sat back in my seat, trying to shake the unease, I noticed a man in seat 12A. He was staring out the window, his posture rigid, as if frozen in place. The strange thing was, the seatbelt sign was off, but he hadn't moved once since the flight began. Curiosity got the better of me. I unbuckled my seatbelt and walked up the aisle. "Excuse me, sir," I said softly, trying not to startle him. He didn't respond. He didn't even blink. A fellow passenger, seated across the aisle, leaned over and whispered, "He's been like that since we took off. It's creepy, right?" Before I could respond, Olivia appeared, her face tense. "Sir, please return to your seat." There was no mistaking the fear in her eyes. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing an electrical issue. Please remain calm." But calm was the last thing anyone felt. The plane shuddered violently, and the seatbelt sign flashed on. I gripped the armrests as passengers screamed. My eyes darted to the window. Outside, the sky was pitch black, but in the distance, I saw something, a faint, pulsating light, moving parallel to the plane. When the turbulence subsided, the cabin was silent. Too silent. I looked around, and that's when I noticed something horrifying. The man in 12A was gone. His seat was empty, the seatbelt still fastened. I turned to the passenger across the aisle. "Where did he go?" She shook her head, her face pale. "He was just there." Panic spread through the cabin as others noticed the empty seat. Olivia hurried down the aisle, her voice trembling as she assured everyone the situation was under control. But I could see it in her eyes, she was just as scared as we were. The rest of the flight was a blur of fear and confusion. The pulsating light outside vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, and the captain announced we were making an emergency landing. When we finally touched down in Honolulu, a team of officials boarded the plane. They questioned every passenger, confiscated phones, and warned us to keep quiet about what we'd seen. As I stepped onto the tarmac, I glanced back at the plane. The window of C-12A was dark, but for a split second, I thought I saw the silhouette of a man staring out. I didn't stick around to find out. To this day, I don't know what happened on that flight. The airline issued a statement blaming technical issues, but those of us who were there know better. If you ever find yourself on a red-eye over the Pacific, and something feels off, trust your instincts. Some mysteries are best left unsolved.
In the world of air travel, diversions happen all the time. Bad weather, mechanical issues, it's all part of the experience. But what if your emergency landing led you somewhere that shouldn't exist? My name is Laura James, and this is the story of the layover that changed my life. It was a late-night flight from Tokyo to Honolulu. The cabin lights were dim, and most passengers were either asleep or scrolling through their phones. I was halfway through a movie when the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to unexpected weather conditions, we will be making an emergency landing. Please remain calm." I glanced out the window. The stars were gone, replaced by dense, swirling clouds. Lightning illuminated the sky, casting eerie shadows across the plain. The turbulence was intense, but the captain's voice remained steady as he assured us we were being diverted to a safe location. Then I saw it, a faint outline of land appearing out of nowhere, illuminated briefly by the lightning. It wasn't on the map, and no one around me seemed to recognize it. When the plane touched down, I expected to see a familiar airport or at least some sign of civilization. Instead, we were greeted by an overgrown runway, flanked by dense jungle on all sides. "Where are we?" someone muttered. The flight attendants were unusually quiet, their faces pale as they ushered us off the plane. The air was thick and humid, filled with the sound of distant waves and unfamiliar animal calls. At the edge of the runway stood a crumbling control tower, its windows shattered. A sign, barely legible, read, "Makua Island Airfield." It didn't take long for passengers to realize something was wrong. This place wasn't on any map. With the plane grounded and no sign of help, the crew decided to explore the airfield for resources. I joined a small group as we ventured toward the control tower. Inside, the air was stale, and the walls were lined with faded charts and dusty equipment. That's when we found it, a flight log. Its pages were yellowed with age, and the entries were dated decades ago. But what sent chills down my spine was the list of names in the passenger manifest. There, among the names, was mine. "This must be a mistake," I whispered, but no one answered. The others were too busy examining a wall covered in photographs. They depicted passengers and crew, all smiling, standing in front of planes just like ours. But one detail stood out: every photo was marked with the same word, "missing." As night fell, the atmosphere grew more oppressive. Some passengers insisted we try to repair the plane, while others argued we should stay put. I decided to investigate further, heading toward the jungle edge where I thought I saw a faint light. I stumbled upon an old radio tower, its metal frame rusted and covered in vines. Inside, a transmitter blinked faintly. Against all odds, it seemed functional. I called for help, my voice shaking as I relayed our location. There was static, followed by a distorted voice. "Stay where you are. Help is coming." But the way the voice lingered on each word sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that the voice wasn't human. By morning, the crew had managed to get the plane ready for takeoff. We boarded quickly, desperate to leave the island. As we ascended into the sky, I looked back one last time. The jungle stretched endlessly, but where the airfield should have been, there was nothing but dense forest. The runway was gone, as if it had never existed. When we landed in Honolulu, authorities questioned us extensively but provided no explanations. The airline issued a vague statement blaming navigation errors, but we knew the truth. What haunts me most isn't what we experienced, but the photos we left behind in that control tower, proof that we weren't the first, and likely wouldn't be the last.
Airports are places of transition between cities, countries, and time zones. They are alive with the buzz of announcements, hurried footsteps, and the excitement of travelers heading toward new destinations. But at night, when the hustle fades and the terminals grow silent, airports take on an entirely different character. This is a story about one such night, a night that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about reality. It started with a delay. My connecting flight out of Denver International Airport had been pushed to the early hours of the morning due to mechanical issues. I was exhausted from a long day of travel, my patience wearing thin. The terminal was nearly deserted, save for a handful of other passengers scattered in the waiting area. The rows of seats were mostly empty, the faint hum of escalators and distant announcements echoing through the cavernous space. I decided to stretch my legs, wandering aimlessly through the terminal. As I passed Gate C22, I noticed it was cordoned off with a "closed for maintenance" sign. That's when I first heard it, a faint whisper, soft and fleeting, as though carried by a breeze that didn't exist. "Eric." I stopped dead in my tracks. My name had been spoken, but there was no one nearby. I turned, scanning the empty hallway. The whisper came again, softer this time, almost drowned out by the low hum of the airport's systems. "Eric." It was unmistakable. I wasn't imagining it. My heart began to race as I approached the closed gate, the fluorescent lights above flickering slightly. Beyond the barrier, the waiting area was dark, the windows reflecting the faint glow of runway lights. It looked untouched, as though no one had passed through it in years. As I stepped closer, I noticed something strange. One of the seats by the window was occupied. A woman sat there, her back to me. She wore an old-fashioned dress, the kind you'd expect to see in a photograph from decades ago. Her hair was neatly pinned up, and she seemed to be staring out at the runway, motionless. I hesitated, then called out, "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you waiting for a flight?" She didn't respond. I stepped closer, the sound of my footsteps unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Ma'am?" I repeated. Finally, she turned her head slightly, enough for me to see her profile. Her expression was blank, her skin pale, almost translucent under the harsh fluorescent lights. "I missed it," she said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. I was about to ask what she meant when a janitor appeared, pushing a cart down the hall. He stopped abruptly when he saw her, his face draining of color. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice trembling. I turned back to the woman, but she was gone. The seat was empty, the window reflecting nothing but the dim lights of the runway. The janitor's cart rattled as he approached me. "What did you see?" he demanded, his voice sharp.
There was a woman sitting there, I said, pointing to the seat. She said she missed her flight. The janitor's hands trembled as he wiped his brow. "You shouldn't have talked to her," he muttered. "She's connected to Flight 216. Flight 216? I asked, confused. "A flight that disappeared 20 years ago," he said. "They never found the wreckage, but people still see them." His words sent chills down my spine. I glanced back at the gate, half expecting to see her sitting there again, but the area was empty. The whispers, however, had returned, faint and elusive, almost as if they were retreating further into the terminal. "I need to get out of here," I muttered, grabbing my bag. The janitor nodded grimly. "That's the best idea you've had all night." As I made my way back toward the main terminal, I felt the weight of unseen eyes on me. The whispers faded, but the unease lingered, a knot in my chest that refused to loosen. When I finally boarded my flight, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As the plane taxied down the runway, I glanced out the window. In the distance, near Gate C22, I thought I saw her, the woman in the old-fashioned dress, standing perfectly still, watching as my plane disappeared into the night. To this day, I don't know who, or what, I encountered in that terminal. Some mysteries are better left unanswered. But if you ever find yourself wandering through an empty airport at night and you hear a whisper, don't follow it. Just keep walking.